Good afternoon and welcome back to the Connecting Caregivers Conference. I hope you had a nice little lunch break. I love looking in the chat and all it says is, learn so much. That's fabulous. Didn't know about that. Tell me something else. So I'm so excited that you're here with us today. And today we have Melissa and Dr. David Bernstein, my friends. How are you today?
We're hanging in there. Whoops. Trying to get our camera squared away. So we've got 4 screens. We're supposed to have 4 screens. Can you hear us?
Go. We just got the top of your heads.
Hold on. Wait a minute. Let's move back a little bit. Better?
That's good. That's good.
So we have 4 screens here. There's 2 below us. Are we supposed to be in a 4-screen situation?
You're good.
Okay.
You just want to share the screen?
No, it's fine. We're fine.
We want to share.
We might want to share something. So
Whenever you want, you just go down to share screen.
okay, let me okay, I got that. So I'm so sorry. I'm just trying to look at the view here. Speaker view or gallery view?
Speaker.
There we go. Okay.
All right.
Now you can see us. Hey. Are we good?
You're good. You're good to go.
All right. So we're all here. Gang's all here, right?
Yes.
Okay. So Linda, what can we say? We're so happy to be part of the 2nd annual Caregiving Conference, virtual again this year, and 3 cheers to you. Woo-hoo!
Thank you.
Welcome. I'm Melissa Bernstein, author of the Power of 5 Test Kitchen Cookbook for caregivers, and one half of the dynamic duo, Dr. David Bernstein. I'd like to introduce him as a physician, author of the Power of 5, the ultimate formula for longevity and remaining youthful, which will be the foundation of our conversation today. How finding and using the Power of 5 formula in your life has unlimited benefits. We're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to kind of do an interview conversation format. And I will begin by asking Dr. B some questions. And then at the end, we will have some time where we will be able to answer questions on the material that we talk about today. And then we have a beautiful handout for you guys I can show you real quick, beautiful handout that we will share the information we talk about today, as well as some other free gifts at the end of our conversation with a link that you can download those.
Yay.
Let's get started, and it's always such a pleasure to chat with you, Dr. B, about our combined 80 years of experience that has it's a lot of tree rings that's culminated into our shared focus on guiding others on how to live their best Power of 5 life. We have heard some really awesome discussions today, Linda, and we want to reflect a little bit of what we've heard so far, because we kind of hear the same themes over and over again, which is wonderful to reinforce what is needed in the caregiver life right now. So, Dr. B, why don't you talk a little bit or reflect a little bit about that?
Well, thanks. There really is a lot of interlocking things, and it's a compliment to Linda in terms of choosing people and setting up certain topics. So I heard Becky, I think this morning, talking about meaningful activities and music and dance. And I think, Melissa, you're probably going to be talking about that a little bit today.
Yeah.
And when I talk about the Power of 5, I talk about 5 S's, and I'm going to talk about it in a little bit. But Dr. Schumann talked about some of those. So everything kind of interlocks, and there's a consistent message that we're going to hear about today.
Dr. Bernstein, can you tell our listeners a little bit about your background? Because
Oh yeah.
That's my first question.
Okay.
Okay. So Melissa's doing the
I'll
interview.
be quiet.
Oh my God.
It's her show.
I know it's your show. We're just guests on her show.
Yeah, right.
So, Dr. B, tell us the audience about yourself and what led you into the field of geriatrics.
Thank you for asking. Linda, thank you for asking. I grew up on Long Island in New York, the son of an immigrant and a World War II combat wounded veteran. and a mother who really showed a lot of caregiving skills for her parents, who happened to be my grandparents. And my father's lessons to me were about grit and determination, and to be a doctor. And my mother's was about kindness, caring, and an expectation that when I was a doctor, I was going to be better than the doctors who took care of her patients, her parents, because she told me they did an absolutely horrible job and they were uncaring, and she insisted that I do something better. So that had a lot to do with who I am. And I practiced for 40 years, geriatrics, mainly in Clearwater, Florida, after residency. I totally love the job. A couple of little things about me that some people don't know, but I talk about, are two things that propelled me into the field of geriatrics. Of course, my mother and her caregiver experiences and my love for my grandparents. But I also, in 1973, saw the cover of National Geographic magazine, and I learned a new word. If the word was centenarian. And this was an article way back in 1973 about people who lived to be 100. And I felt that that was something I wanted in my career. I wanted to know about, I wanted to know what those traits were, and be able to share that with people. Another thing that happened when I graduated high school, the commencement speaker was a gentleman by the name of David Fisher. And in the 10 years from his graduation to the commencement address, he had written 10 books. And I thought, I can do that. And that I want to be a doctor and I want to be an author. And so I accomplished that during my career. And now in my re-inspirement period, I'm working on educating the public and doing a lot more things.
So tell us about your interest in socialization. That falls right along with what you were saying about centenarians, and what does socialization have to do with loneliness?
Well, I want to talk a little bit about my journey through my geriatrics.
Oh, did I miss a question?
Oh, yeah,
I'm so sorry.
Question number 2.
Excuse me.
It's question number 2 over there.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
All right.
Tell us about your journey and your career as a geriatrician. I thought I asked that question already.
You're dreaming. I loved my career. And one of the things I was able to do was learn the secrets that people had in their long lives. And I was very fortunate because I got invited to speak at lots of adult programs. And I would go around and I'd ask people what were their secrets to their success. And their secrets became my first book. But it was that people had some attributes that created their lives to be better, more fulfilling. So I'll take a moment and tell you it had to do with the acronym GRACE, a 5-letter word, stands for goals or purpose, roots, attitude like gratitude and kindness, companionship, and interacting with the environment, both your internal environment and the external environment. So this became what I would look for and try to nurture in my patients as I proceeded in my career. Certainly being a geriatrician had the medical aspect of what I had to do. I always thought of preventive type things, like telling my patients not to avoid going on ladders and not to go on the roof, and things that would preserve their lives. Because, frankly, when people live to be 65 or 70, if they're healthy, their life expectancy is 17 to 20 years. So you certainly want those people to avoid lots of pitfalls. So that was my journey.
So what prompted you to write the books that you wrote? And what does the power of 5 have to do with the subjects for caregivers and loneliness?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question. Good question. Well, I just mentioned about my first book. I've got some good news and bad news old, but the power of 5. The first book was about what I observed in people. The second book was one that I researched and found an easy way to apply 5 things that people can do with intention to live that healthier life, because the healthier life and having a long health span is better than just living a life of disability. And it does intersect with what we're talking about today in terms of caregivers, because if you're a caregiver, you want to maintain your health. if you're a caregiver and you're getting paid from an outside source, you want to be fit and you want to be able to do the job and certainly be able to love the job you're doing. If you're a loved one caregiver and you're caring for a spouse, you need to take the precautions to take your health seriously and maintain that health. So that has a lot to do with what the Power of Five is about. Those 5 things: avoiding stress, avoiding sweets, and getting more sleep, sweat, and sex, and socialization, and connections, and so forth. So in terms of what we've heard about today, there are going to be 2 things that may not have been covered as much. And so at the end of the conversation today, after some of your presentation, I'll get back to the caregiver stress. But you did ask me about loneliness. And even before the pandemic, it was clear that loneliness was a health hazard, that I'd been reading about it for a while. And loneliness has the impact on our health the same as smoking 15 cigarettes a day or being obese. And those are significant health hazards. So I started to include that. And I changed my focus. I mean, my focus is 5 S's, and the final S of sex was on the cover and is a keynote part of it because sex sells, at least in our generation. And so we've stretched that to get to socialization, connections, and that intimacy part. The opposite of intimacy is loneliness. And so I want to read to you a quote from Vivek Murthy's definition. And Vivek Murthy was the Surgeon General of the United States in the Obama administration. And he wrote a book called Together. And in his book, here's the definition that he used for loneliness. It is a subjective feeling that that you're lacking the social connections you need. It can feel like being stranded, abandoned, or cut off from the people with whom you belong, even if you're surrounded by other people. Important point. What's missing when you're lonely is a feeling of closeness, trust, the affection of genuine friends, loved ones, and community. And so another way to describe this is loneliness is a feeling of being cut off from your tribe. And if we go back to our basic evolution, we were all part of a tribe, and it's part of our DNA, it's part of our makeup. And if we're cut off from our tribe, that's serious. And it gets to there's going to be a question you're going to ask me later that I'll just discuss about chronic inflammation. But some of the characters of loneliness create health problems. They increase your cortisol level, your stress hormones, and they interfere with lots of the things that make us healthy. So when we're lonely, we're also enabling ourselves to be ill and to be chronic inflamed. So I want to mention just a couple more things because you have so many things to share.
So what other things for loneliness?
Yeah, it's really important to think about the things, and we've included this part in our packet, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the things you can do to overcome loneliness. And especially for our listeners today, I'm going to suggest that we participate in support groups and joining a club, a chess club, a photography club, golf, tennis, whatever. And I know that we're dealing with caregivers. So, it's really important for caregivers to have those escape valves and be able to do something. So they may need to call friends to enable them to do things like enroll in a class of like-minded people, a dance class, a Tai Chi class, yoga, things of that nature. I'll also point out that AARP has a lot to offer in terms of programs, and then there's discovering, and these are things, this is a two-pronged reason, but college classes for arts and history, not only are they places where we can meet people and avoid that loneliness, but we also stimulate our brain, which is really important for our the age of process.
And I think one of the points that
Melissa, can you talk a little bit louder, please?
yes, can you hear me now?
Yeah, you better.
What I'm saying is that what caregivers do is give themselves themselves permission to take a little time for themselves every week and do one of these activities, whether they're lonely or not. It's just to have the socialization.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for caregivers who have the opportunity to take a part-time job, to just get out of the house and be exposed to people of other ages and other backgrounds, and even do some volunteer work. Now, again, I know that I've just given a very broad description of some of the things you would want to do to avoid loneliness, and some of the people who are caregivers may not have that ability, but those people who are servicing caregivers could certainly encourage them to do those things in the time that a paid caregiver is coming into the house, to encourage those things, because that will enable the whole situation to continue to rock and roll, basically, because if it doesn't, it all falls apart like a house of cards. I like to think of the fact that this loneliness piece, the intimacy, the socialization, it's vital to the health and our longevity. And that I know it's part of the glue, the connections, the companionships that make for fulfilling relationships and lead to greater happiness. And also, when you have other people around you, there's someone to say, you don't look so good, go visit the doctor. Right. You're going to be healthier by having those things. So now, if I'm reading our script pretty well, it says that I'm now supposed to interview you, Melissa.
There we go.
Yeah, be ready for some action here, because you never know what I'll throw in there. Can you tell me a little bit about yours?
Melissa, you got to get closer to the microphone or something. We can hear Dr. Bernstein clearly.
Right in front of me. Can you hear me now? I'm going to hold the microphone. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Better.
Better? Okay, well, I'm going to put it right up to my face here. I hate to show this, but okay.
Okay, tell me about yourself and what inspired you to be an occupational therapist.
Great question. Born and raised in Buffalo, New York, I was the neighborhood babysitter at a very young age with several families. During high school, I volunteered with preemies at a study at the Children's Hospital, and I volunteered at the OT department, and knew that I wanted to do something in healthcare, whether it be pediatrics or adults. But I think the pivotal moment for me was when I was asked to take care of my aunt who was very ill with cancer. I was about maybe 13 or 14, and my mom was one that didn't deal well with illness or hospitals. So she said, would you mind going over to Aunt Betty's house? And I willingly just said, absolutely. And I really helped her throughout. And I kind of learned by doing how to care for her when she was homebound. And I think that is what really was the pivotal moment to say, I want to be in healthcare, and did it. I went to Boston University, and at that time it was called Sargent College, but now it's called Health Sciences. I was 17. It wasn't because I was smarter than anybody else. It wasn't. No, my mother changed my birth certificate. True story. I am not kidding. Out of the house. So I was a December birthday, and in New York, you had to be turning 5 on December 1st. My birthday is December 4th. So she changed that 4 to a 1 and got me into kindergarten. Isn't that hysterical? Yeah. To this day, I'm kind of sorry she did, but because I had to work extra hard because I was the youngest of everything. So I had to work extra hard, but it all turned out. So after graduating, I focused on pediatrics and then adults in assisted living, long-term care, and assisted with doing some caregiver training. And many years later, developed an online company that provided education and courses to physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech language pathology, athletic trainers, and guardians to get their needed and wanted continuing education for licensure and certification. Again, staying in that same education mode. And in 2015, I transitioned away from that, and we turned our e-learning business into how we all can age gracefully with health, longevity, and wellness, so I could work closer with this guy and really work to support our efforts as we continue to write on the subject and really tapping into our Power of Five life. And my recent publication and ongoing project, the Power of Five Test Kitchen, which you guys I talked about last time on this seminar last year, is a cookbook for caregivers that promotes purposeful engagement in the kitchen for the caregiver to take their care recipient or their loved one into the kitchen for a purposeful activity. But we're going to talk more about that in a little bit.
So why don't you tell our audience exactly what an occupational therapist is, what you do, and how is that different from a physical therapist?
Well, I'm not going to compare myself to a physical therapist. We don't do that in OT. It's a different profession.
People get mixed up, and they do get mixed
up. They really do. But an occupational therapists are master doctor level healthcare professionals. We're part of the interdisciplinary team, which the team includes nursing, dietary, physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech language pathology, audiology. And, we are all part of this team that cares for aging adults. And occupational therapy is the occupation of life. For years, people thought I found people jobs. Occupational therapy, we thought I found people jobs, which makes sense.
Why I asked the question.
But really, it's the occupation of living. So it's the everyday activities of daily living, which are dressing, bathing, personal hygiene, functional mobility, cooking, eating, feeding. These are all the things that we take for granted that we do on a daily basis. These are our ADLs.
So I have another question for you coming up, but before I ask the question, I want to tell our audience that we decided to put up limited or no slides because we wanted them to focus on what we were talking about. We will provide the information in our little packet, but we have lots of information to share, but really we're talking to this group and we're talking about that so they're not distracted in that regard. So I wanted to get that point out. And then my next question is, tell us about what in your background lends itself to working with aging and older adults.
Well, I think that shift when I really focused on geriatrics and long-term care and assisted living was when I became a partner in a practice I joined in the early 80s in Clearwater. And we really focused on the geriatric population across the country in skilled nursing facilities, assisted living communities. And it was that point that I really became intimately involved with all aspects of resident care from both the provider standpoint and internally from the caregiver and nursing perspective. So striving to make their jobs easier and collaborative with the interdisciplinary team on behalf of the residents that they served. The importance of occupational therapy intervention with caregivers is essential. Intervention and purposeful activities and engagement is really the essence of our profession. So we not only provide treatment and care to those who suffer from illness, stroke, disability, a hip fracture, but for the families and the caregivers of those care recipients. I feel OTs are really the perfect practitioner as part of the interdisciplinary team because we really give the support to the caregivers and the care recipients along with physical therapy and speech in their respective specialty areas. So we really are a great collaborative team together. I wouldn't do it without my PT and my speech partners. I mean, it doesn't work well unless you're all on the same page when you're working with caregivers, families, and the care recipients.
So, that really fits into to your personality type too, because you're really a team player and you coalesce people, bring people together. So it's a good match for you and what's been your career and your occupation and your personality type. So what about some of the projects you're working with now? I know that you're spinning a few plates. You and I are doing things together, but what specifically you have to talk to the audience about today?
Well, I think one of my most important programs right now is the collaboration in the kitchen between the caregiver and the care recipient. Being an occupational therapist and being a certified chef, I kind of married those two things to come up with this program. And the cookbook helps to outline, what the benefits are for bringing a loved one into the kitchen. So the program focuses on the care of others, meal preparation, cleanup, and encouraging participation and engagement really at any level of the activity. So these kind of fall into, there's another level of ADLs called an IADL. I don't want to get into the weeds here about it, but it's called instrumental activities of daily living. And essentially, it is the higher level of things that we do on a daily basis, such as, initiating care of pets, child rearing, communication management, balancing our checkbook, taking care of our home. Those are higher level safety procedures, shopping independently, mobility around the community. Those are the kinds of things that are the higher level IADL. So this program really focuses on a higher level of self-care in preparation of food and a recipe in the kitchen.
So, it's interesting because in listening to the presentation earlier with Becky, when she talked about doing something together, and that's kind of the essence of what you were talking about. And so what's the connection between what you're doing and your cookbook and the Power of Five? Talk about that. And, the Power of Five is something that I wrote that you've incorporated into what you're doing. So talk a little bit about that.
Well, the Power of Five Test Kitchen wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the Power of Five formula that you wrote. Yeah. So I thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And, as Dr. B talked about, it describes the 5 S's that we need to do more of or less of for healthy aging. So more sleep, more sweat, more socialization, less stress, and less sweets. But that sweets S, that's what is the realm of healthy eating, advocating a Mediterranean lifestyle where we offer the instruction on how to put healthy eating to practice. So the concept of the program and the cookbook really sprouted from that core foundation of the book, expanding sample menus, doing suggestions for healthy eating. And, we call our kitchen where all the magic happens, the Power of Five Test Kitchen. That's kind of how the whole thing came about. And it's been the place where I've, been doing my cooking for the last, forever, but since the cookbook, like the last 3 years.
And feeding me.
And of course, you're my number one tester.
I am the test kitchen. Melissa, if I can interject just a little bit, one of the things that's been consistently researched is the benefits of eating a certain way.
Yes.
And so the Mediterranean diet wins all the time as a number one in lots of different categories. Although you and I take it a little bit further and just eat a plant-based diet.
Yes.
And I read more and more about the benefits of doing that. And I won't belabor the point, but what I will indicate is the importance of avoiding sweets, particularly sugar, because that has negative impacts on our health and the chronic inflammation that we may have in our bodies. So making a choice to eat better, number one, is important. And number two, it's important to everybody listening, whether you're the patient eating the food that we recommend or the caregiver, because maintaining your health is really very good. And you can start and should start as early as possible, but it's never too late to make the changes that we can. So that's really an important part of it.
Exactly.
And it's an important part of the give and take of our interview today, because it gives me a chance to talk a little bit more. So the next question I have teed up for you is, tell us about the Power of Five Kitchen Cookbook, Caregiver Edition, and why is it different and unique from other cookbooks?
So first, I'd like to talk a little bit about the caregiver.
Close it to the mic.
Oh, first, I'd like, is that better?
Yeah.
It might be better if I just hold it up. Okay. I'd like to talk first about the caregiver and why I felt that this was necessary for me to create this project. Caregivers have an enormous job, as we've been discussing all morning today, and oftentimes a day in the life does not always go as planned. And more than often, it's easy for the caregiver to do for the care recipient in order to keep a schedule and get everything done rather than fostering independence. and this isn't a blame game or anything, this is just a fact of life, is that it's just, there's a lot to do during the day with a care recipient, especially if they're at a higher level of care and need. So additionally, we all know that food is really comfort, and under the stress of caregiving and the added burden of uncertainty from the pandemic, we naturally succumb to the temptation of junk food or comfort food. That makes us all feel better at the moment, but we all know that consuming these foods really has the opposite effect. So poor nutrition promotes a host of other health issues that, as Dr. B mentioned, result in chronic inflammation. And chronic inflammation has just very difficult effects on our health and the caregiver's health and the care recipients. So when the health of the caregiver is compromised, then the care recipient is adversely impacted. So getting back to learning the basics of good, healthy eating and a few easy to prepare recipes that can promote and enhance the experience for the care recipient and the caregiver in the kitchen is what this we are striving for. And having healthy recipes to engage with this activity. So it's a long way of saying that it's really for caregivers, the care recipient's health, and it's a way for the caregiver to be introduced to a fun and meaningful collaboration activity that is safe and rewarding, and it feeds the soul and it feeds our tummy, providing purpose. And the cookbook includes the guides for the caregiver success. So it outlines all different guides in different stages for them to be able to utilize in the kitchen. So my recipes are all tested in the Power 5 Test Kitchen, as I mentioned, by my #1 tester, Dr. B, and friends and family who ensure that the instructions are clear and the recipes are just the right balance based on our Power of 5 health eating formula, which is less sugar, oil, no processed foods or additives, whole grains, legumes, fresh vegetables, and fruit, preferably organic, but not necessary if you clean your vegetables well. So as I mentioned, blending my skills as an OT and chef, it was a way that I could give back and feel that I could help have a caregiver feel comfortable coming into the kitchen. There may be some fear and anxiety, but I think that if they just take it slow and with simple techniques that they can use during the activity, they can feel comfortable and feel some joy during the activity.
Yes.
So the first guide that I want to share with you is what I call compassionate cueing actions. These are reminders, because you guys know all of this stuff. I just wanted to remind you these apply to when you're doing an activity in the kitchen. Be respectful at all times when communicating during the task or activity, and accept the level where they are and work from there, because they may just be able to stir something in a bowl. They may just be able to sit and talk with you while you're making the recipe. Any level of engagement is fine. Providing general guidance and suggestions throughout the cooking will help ease the success of completing the task. Never force or disregard any of their feelings. If they are resistant, retreat and try a different approach. And remember, always safety first in the kitchen with appliances, utensils, ovens, etc. Also, it's very important to tend to the positioning necessary for the care recipient. They may need to sit through the activity. They may be okay standing, etc. So just be aware of that. The next section I provide is levels of assistance. So there are 5 different levels of assistance that we use in our rehab world that also caregivers use. And the first one is supervision only, which means no physical assistance is needed. The person can independently complete the activity. Verbal cueing, it's just what it sounds like. You need little verbal instruction to help complete the task. Minimal assistance is minimal hands-on assistance to guide, and maybe offering some verbal assistance as well to complete an activity. Moderate assistance is requiring more assistance. And then maximum assistance is they cannot complete the task without maximum verbal and maximum physical assistance. So those have been really important to be aware of in terms of what kinds of assistance you may need to utilize during a cooking activity, and the way in which you will help to know that information is the next question that Dr. B is going to ask me.
Might as well answer it now.
I will answer it.
You have an ability skills checklist that's in your book, and also in the handout that we'll provide.
Yes.
That people can download.
Well, and didn't you mention last conference when cooking music helps?
I'm getting there. Yes, it
Okay.
does. Of
Okay.
course it does. It's the best. Yep. Yes. So Linda brought up music, and I am an advocate of playing music as long as it's not distracting. If you have someone that's very distractible and is unable to attend to tasks, then obviously either don't have any music for distraction or have it very low in the background. But so Dr. B has a comment about
so
that.
rap music is the music of today. Should they be playing rap
No,
music?
absolutely not. They should not. So Dr. B has a formula and
Oh, yeah,
about
formula.
music. So I'm going to let him say about his formula about listening to music.
Well, people have studied this, Melissa, and so the imprint that music has on our brains occurs when we're between 18 and 22. So anybody needs to just take a person's birth age, say they were born in 1940, and they had 20 years to that, 1960. That's when the music is imprinted on this person's brain.
Fascinating, really.
And they're going to find it most comfortable. You don't have to even try and ask them who their favorites were. It's going to be in that range, and go to that right away rather than.
Oh, wow.
That's pretty clever, right?
I didn't know that. That's pretty clever, but we know how
We're
clever.
always trying to give you something new. So you talked a little about there's a handout that you have about disabilities checklist, which people can formulate and use, and talk a little bit about the activities and enhance meaning.
Well, I want to go back real quick and tell them what's on this checklist. So it really just kind of gives a guide as to what level your care recipient and loved one is at before you start cooking and before you decide what recipe to make. So it's really important to have, choose the recipe together and have all the ingredients, the utensils and everything out in preparation for the engagement. So the things that they will look at is things like posture, engagement level, like attention span, hand usage, tremors, weakness. I've also listed in the back some adaptive equipment that are examples of tools that you can use to make people or help people be independent, not make them, but help them be independent in the kitchen, such as weighted spoons, things with straps on them in case they don't have any grasp. So there's quite a few examples in the back. And so those are available as well. So the checklist also is foods likes and dislikes. So you want to make sure that you're cooking something that they like. And when you have conversations with them about the activity, ask them what kinds of things that they used to prepare with their mom or their grandparent. Maybe there's a wonderful recipe that could facilitate conversation. So throughout this activity, you're working on past reminiscence. You're bringing in, you're really important. You're bringing in memories that, you may be bringing memories back to life when you cook something that they really loved during their younger years. So that's a really important aspect of this whole program is the engagement, not only in the cooking. It's really not the recipe. It's really about the process of what you're doing and the past reminiscence and the music. And don't feel like you have to do the whole cooking activity in one sitting. If they get fatigued, you might want to break it in quarters or break it in half. Take a little time to listen to the music, maybe get up and do a little dancing. Because again, that might facilitate some past reminiscence. So,
You know, one of my caregivers contacted me after the last conference, and she said Saturday is now cooking day with mom.
Wonderful.
She said it's salad early in the morning because that's as much as she can do early in the morning.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
In the afternoon, and then they make the main part in the evening. She said, but I spend the day on Saturday with her just chatting and looking at all recipes and looking at photos. So,
that's so wonderful to hear.
The last seminar. So thank you for all your ideas because it really makes a difference.
You're welcome.
We're always busy rushing.
Exactly. Yeah, you just have to take a deep breath. And I know some caregivers might be anxious about doing this, but I think if you're well prepared and you understand what are the capabilities and you pick something simple to do and you don't just break it up in steps, I think it will be fine. I think it's going to be beneficial to both the care recipient, and they might be pleasantly surprised on how great it turned out.
Well, now they started also planting some vegetables.
What's that?
Now they also started planting some vegetables.
There you go. That's a great thing. Yeah.
Another activity.
Right. So I think we are getting late on. How's our time going, Linda?
You're okay.
Let's see. So let me just let's see. I think I kind of talked about that already, and I think I'd like to have Dr. B talk a little bit now about kind of the day in the life of the caregiver and the details, and speak about the enormity of caregiver stress. And I'm happy to answer any questions, Linda, about the program afterwards, but I'd like us to make sure we get all of our salient points in here.
Yeah, so Melissa, before I do, there was a point about chronic inflammation that we talked about earlier, and I have it as something I wanted to address. The whole book that I wrote, The Power of Five, is about chronic inflammation and the 5 things that contribute to it. So just the brief description of chronic inflammation is an example such as getting a splinter in your finger. Your body has a reaction that says, get that splinter out of here. This is an intrusion into my body. It's foreign. It doesn't belong here. Let's send out some white blood cells, some red blood cells. Let's increase our cortisol level. There's a major invasion going on, and these neurochemicals and hormones have a favorable effect if it's acute, but if it's ongoing, it has a detrimental effect on our arteries, on our brain, and our risk for inflammatory disease and cancer. So when we're under constant stress, it's that same effect. So what is more stressful in the life of someone than being a caregiver? And I wrote some things last month, the month of April, which is only a few days ago, because it was stress awareness month. So I was really up to date on some of my things that I wanted to talk about. And there's so much stress going on in the world. And I would urge people to turn off their TV, turn off their news. I mean, there's nothing more stressful than, no matter what, whether it's red or blue, that there's so much stress. And if we spend too much time on looking on our feeds, on our phones, it just is hazardous to our health. So the questions that would arise are, what are some of the early warning signs associated with stress? And here's a few, and they'll be in our handout. Feeling overwhelmed, lonely, guilty, sad, or constantly worried. Feeling fatigued most of the time, becoming easily irritated or angered, lack of interest in activities that were previously enjoyed, significant change in weight or sleep habits, frequent headaches, neck, low back pain, and abuse of alcohol or other drugs. So we do know that people can do their own little self-inventory, or a family member may come along and say something, and I would urge people to take it seriously. And then, the next question is, what can we do about it if we recognize it? Well, just start by realizing we can grab 3 to 5 minutes in our life just to take a few deep breaths, just some way to de-stress. There are all kinds of things on the internet, all kinds of things you can put, on your phone, but things to remind you that here's a good time. Just sit down, close your eyes, breathe in and breathe out. And then there's some other things that people can do. Now, for caregivers, this is really difficult because if you're at a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week situation, it may not be easy. But then again, there might be people around who can spell you just a few minutes. But 5 or 10 minutes of listening to some calm music, reading for pure enjoyment, not necessarily reading news and stressful things or reading things about dementia and caregiving, but things that are keep your mind off of it. Exercising, even if it's a walk in a park. Getting out in nature. You know, we've talked so much, Melissa and I, about how important it is to just be with nature, and there's data to support that. And I recently had a hip operation, and the ambulation was difficult, but I made sure to go out in my garden every day and check on my amaryllis to see when they were blossoming. So it was
with his crutches and his brace.
but it was all done with intention. It was like, I want to see my flowers, but I also know that I needed to be out with nature. And you kind of have to force yourself into those situations. And if you have a hobby, even if it's for a few minutes, you know, engage in that hobby because it's important. And then, so the next thing I would say is what can be done to relieve caregiver stress? Because there aren't some solutions, but people have to be open to the solutions. You know, and as a physician, you know, much of what I did was curing people or taking care of their chaos and what was going on. But I was always a big advocate of doing things preventively. So, you know, have a well thought out plan ahead of time at the very start to avoid some of the really stressful things that can happen, and put that plan in force and have some escape valves and individuals who can provide help or help bail out when a crisis occurs. I will guarantee a crisis will occur. They usually do, and I was a really good doctor, but you know, the things that were amazing to me is that I was able to predict them. I saw them coming, and I encourage people to have a plan. And then some of the things that you'll stress, Linda, I know, is that ask for and accept help.
Yeah, talked about that today.
And or relief when someone offers it to you. You know, you can say, well, I couldn't do it, but we offered. You know, you take the help when it's offered, and ask for it because people are there to help you. Know what your limitations are. Don't overextend yourself. Like I said, have a plan which even includes respite, where you can get a few days off with someone taking care of the loved one, or diminishing your caregiver responsibilities, because 24/7, 365 is without relief is doomed to fail. General Eisenhower said, "Failing to plan is planning to fail." And you know, this is something that happens. It's predictable. Take care of your own physical and mental health. And that, again, the Power of Five is about how you can maintain the strongest body and mental state so that you can endure this. It's a marathon of sorts, and major crises will occur, and they can develop. And if you become incapacitated, then the whole thing falls apart. So taking care of yourself, attend support group if it's appropriate, and remember the 5 things in the Power of Five, which is, you know, avoiding stress and learning to deal with that, but also maintain a healthy diet, get your 7 or 8 hours of sleep every night, exercise, and maintain those connections with other people that I talked about earlier. You know, those connections are really important. And
so Dr. Bernstein, someone is listening in their car, and so they can't go in the chat, so they text me.
Oh.
And said, can you give them an example of what's one thing they should cut out of their diet right away? If they were to do one thing today, she said, we don't eat well. I'd like to start eating better. How do I start?
Sugar. And if someone's if someone is consuming alcohol, it should be 0.
Right.
There's something that's misunderstood about alcohol. Alcohol has its problems, but alcohol gets converted to sugar like that. When you eat a potato, it's a long string of atoms that the body has to chop apart. But when you drink alcohol, it goes, there's one, oh, sugar. There's one, there's one, sugar. And so that's like the sugar part. So I would link those together. And sugar is addicting, and there's things written. There's one of my favorite authors is Robert Lustig, but many others have written about how sugar goes to your brain and triggers the release of dopamine, which creates pleasure. That's not happiness, that's pleasure. And then people get addicted to it. And you could read about what cereal companies have done to keep people addicted to sugar. And other companies have put sugar and just the right amount of sugar in beverages so that people become addicted to those. So cut out sugary beverages, drink water.
Read labels.
Pardon me?
Read labels.
Yeah, I will admit one of my own little mistakes I made in life. It was a short one, but I fell in love with bread and butter pickles. And I couldn't imagine why I love these bread and butter pickles so much. And one day I was in the grocery store because I was buying them myself. Melissa would have bought them if I had, but I was buying them myself. And I went, that's funny. Why would they have sugar-free or low sugar bread and butter pickles? Because there's no sugar in here. Then I looked at the label and I don't know, it's added 5 grams of added sugar in my bread and butter pickles. I haven't eaten another one since.
Oh my goodness.
Things do slip in, and
you've got to read labels. That is so important. Now that legally they have to put what's in products. But as fresh as you can make things, and staying away from products that are processed is going to be very helpful and help to reduce sugar just naturally.
It's kind of just like back to basics.
Exactly.
Make a ring around the grocery store in the outer ring and skip the middle part.
Don't go to the middle of the grocery store.
Right.
I wrote a blog about that, so you can check out my blog about shopping in a grocery store.
Yeah. A lot of people don't realize that.
So this is a good time for us to stop and take some questions. But I would like to reiterate the fact that we do have some handouts that we'd love to provide.
If you email me the handouts, I'll send them to anybody that requests them. But tell us also where they can find you guys and where they can find the cookbooks. And
so we have just rebranded our website. So
closer to the mic, Melissa.
I'm sorry. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So we have rebranded ourselves, and we are now powerof5life.com. So you can send Melissa at powerof5life.com, David at powerof5.com. We have an e-store. They can just click on that. They can click on the food blog. You'll have all my food blogs and all my recipes. They can sign up for recipes to come to their mailbox on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. And then we have a free gift for you all. If you go to poweroflife.com,
right.
powerof5life.com.
Okay.
/gift, not gifts, gift. And you will have some options to choose from when you go to that web address. So powerof5life.com / I'm going to put it in the, if you want to put it in the chat, I can do that. /gift. And then you can reach us, at the same place.
I'll put it in the description. So the same woman who's driving wants to know if you give cooking classes.
I have been asked. I might start that if I have enough interest.
Okay.
So send me an email if you're interested in me doing a cooking class or even some consulting in the kitchen with a loved one. I love doing that, and I'm available, to come into your kitchen.
I mean, how nice would it be to get a couple of caregivers together with their loved ones?
That would be
social
awesome.
Cooking class.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I'd love to do that.
All right, I'll ask around.
Okay. Do we have any other questions?
Not right now.
Okay, so
there was something I wanted to say about the information in here. We put all the things that I talked about in here, and Melissa put her instructions about what to do in the kitchen. I can't reiterate enough that that anything that you do is better than nothing. Kind of like that woman in the car who had some question about the first thing to do. It's the first of many, but we all start with the first step, and it's never too late. People think, well, I'm really too old. Well, if you're consuming a lot of sugar and your memory is not working as well, and you're not feeling as well, and you're achy in the morning and kind of feel hungover and things like that, some of it may be from your diet, and cleaning up your diet becomes incredibly important. Exercise is important. Exercise is the best antidepressant that we know, and getting enough sleep is important. And when you're a caregiver, sleep is a precious commodity, and timing your going to bed with your loved one, if you're home together, then becomes a.
You hear us okay, Linda?
Yeah, you got you okay. It was just a blip for a second. We're okay.
Okay.
So, timing the going to bed at the same time so that you're not awakened in the middle of the night, or, if you have to go to bed at 7 p.m., just so you're going to bed at the same time, rather than staying up late and then being awakened becomes important. It's a matter of self-preservation. And I'm a big advocate of making the changes you need to make to survive, because it's really difficult.
Well, you heard me say earlier today, and I'll say again, your caregiving experience can be the most horrific experience in your life, or can be close to beautiful, depending on how you handle it.
Mhm.
And we need to take care of ourselves. And you, the two of you, I just love your books. I love everything. David, tell us about some of your other books, because when I first met you, I heard you speak about driving, I believe it was.
Yeah.
Well, that's a really great question. I actually submitted my Senior Driving Dilemmas book to a platform called ALZ Authors, ALZ Authors. So I'm part of their platform. So
They're fabulous.
I did write a book that encourages people and family members to evaluate their aging parent or loved one to consider taking away the keys. And I think even if I can only help one person in this world avoid killing themselves or someone else, I've done my job. And people would rather talk to their parents about funeral plans and moving before they would talk about taking away their car keys.
Exactly.
It's such a highly charged situation. And some people will be forced into doing some things because gas prices have gone up and automobiles are hard to get and so forth. But we shouldn't take the easy way out, and we need to face that head on. My first book, I've Got Some Good News and Some Bad News for Old, is the things I talked about earlier, about the 5 things that I observed: having goals or purpose in life, knowing your roots, your DNA, because you can adjust your diet and your whole life based on what you know about your family history, having a positive attitude. And I've always talked about gratitude, but I'm adding in there the importance of kindness. And it's a subtle difference, but being kind to people. And I think in this day and age, there are lots and lots of people who are kind, and then there are lots of people who just don't understand anything about being kind to one another.
Right.
And that's incredibly important. And of course, the companionship piece. I mean, it's done, and the companionship piece is really interesting because it has to be done with some intentionality, like all the others. So, in my situation with Melissa, we're doing our stuff together because we want to. And then I've worked on, in retirement, making acquaintances and friends because it's going to be for their health and mine. And so, and I explained it to people. I said, look, I'd like to spend some more time with you. And there's a group that I get together with on Thursdays, and some other people I've met in different situations that I spend time with and interact with. And that's good for my health and theirs.
Yeah.
Of course, the stuff relative to eating and exercise, those things are self-evident, and what I wrote about in my Power.
So the girl that's driving said she just passed Dunkin' Donuts and didn't go in.
Real good.
That's a good move right there.
Move. Oh, that's funny.
And if you can drive into Dunkin' Donuts and just buy coffee, you're okay.
That's right. Black coffee, you're good.
But when the wafting of the smell of the donuts
Yeah.
comes out,
It's
you know,
a killer.
yeah. So, you know, the Melissa's laughing and she's a good laugher, but the point, the truth of the matter is that these corporations know this, and they make sure that there's enough odor there or aroma there to trigger your taste buds and make you buy something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's not by accident. The tobacco industry knew they were addicting people to nicotine. They just didn't tell people. And the sugar industry knew that they were addicting people. They just withheld the information.
Right.
So it's coming out now, and people need to make choices.
Yeah.
No. Well, thank you so much for being with me
You're
today,
very
my friend.
welcome.
I always enjoy having you. If you ever need anybody to test any of those recipes, you have my number.
Absolutely. You got it.
It comes up every now and again.
It does come up every now and again. Well, I'm working on a large cookbook right now. I mean, 150 recipes, so I'm kind of in the throes. So I will be sending you some of those. Maybe you could try them and tell me if I've written them properly or if they're good.
You cook, Linda?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Good.
At one time, I was a caterer.
Ah, really? Cool.
All right. Well, we'll be
Well,
sending
be
you some
looking
recipes.
for the Power of 5 Test Kitchen Cookbook coming out in the fall. So.
All right. Thank you, my friends. Have a delicious day. We'll talk
Thank
soon.
you. Well, bye.
Bye-bye. So we're getting ready for our next speaker, who is Reverend Dawn Hager, and we're going to talk about caregiving and spirituality.